If you are still stuffing your React components with useMemo, useCallback, or useEffect hooks, you are doing things wrong. Modern React simplified how performance optimization works, and you should probably stop wasting time manually memoizing everything. Let me explain. For a bit of context, despite its massive market share, React is kind of playing catch-up when it comes to finding the balance between a seamless dev experience and performance out of the box. Libraries like Solid and Svelte have shown how fine-grained reactivity or compile time optimizations can deliver faster, leaner apps without developers micromanaging every render. On the other hand, React's reactivity model requires a deeper understanding of processes like rendering and reconciliation, which handle virtual DOM building and diffing. The virtual DOM, which is kind of a deprecated idea these days, was introduced to solve the performance issues of direct DOM manipulation by keeping an in-memory version of the UI. But without a proper understanding of how the VDOM works, you can run into serious problems with unnecessary renders, janky updates, and bloated code that does nothing to help performance. And this is how we got to the point where every React component has a bunch of hooks sprinkled all over the place like confetti, because developers felt they needed to manually control every render to keep things snappy. But the good news is that modern React fixes a lot of this by taking memoization decisions away from you. The React compiler automatically analyzes your components and injects memoization where it matters. You don't need to decide if something should be memoized or if your event handler needs a useCallback. This leads to cleaner, smaller code and fewer bugs from missing or stale dependencies. So now that the React compiler is handling memoization, you can forget the mental gymnastics of tracking every prop or worrying that one inline function might trigger a re-render of the entire component tree. It's important to understand that the React team didn't invent some magic trick here. They finally made React catch up to patterns already proven in other frameworks where smart compilers or fine-grained reactivity prevent unnecessary updates by default. The React compiler works by analyzing your components at build time before your code ever runs in the browser. When you write JSX, the compiler doesn't just transpile it into React create element calls or JSX runtime code like it used to do in the past. Now, it goes a step further by parsing your component functions, tracking every variable, property, and state value you use inside them. Then, it builds a dependency graph to figure out which pieces of data affect the component's output. For example, if you have a component where only one prop changes often and the rest stay the same, the compiler can detect that only that prop matters for reactivity. Then it will generate optimized code that updates the component only when that specific prop changes, avoiding unnecessary renders even if other unrelated props or parent re-renders occur. The compiler also looks at closures inside your components and decides whether they're stable or if they'd cause stale references or unnecessary re-renders. Instead of having to wrap these functions in useCallback or wrap computed values in useMemo, the compiler generates equivalent memoized versions behind the scenes, but only where they're actually needed. This means fewer footguns for everyone and fewer hacks like reordering hooks or hoisting functions outside of components just to avoid re-renders. Of course, some people will resist this shift because they feel like they lose control or they don't trust tools they can see working. But clinging to manual memoization is like refusing to use a modern garbage collector because you'd rather manage memory yourself. If the compiler does a better job than you at optimizing renders, there's no reason to fight it. If you like this video, you might find some of these ones interesting as well. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and until next time, thank you for watching.